Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service, jbiztechvalley.com, and as you can see here, columnist for the Jewish Press.
I'm having a lot of fun doing all of that. It keeps me real busy, and what I write for the Jewish Press is about how how government relates to the Jewish community, or doesn't, as the case may be. So, but someone who knows all too well about government is our guest here today, Josh Sabo, who's Jewish. He's an attorney in Troy, and welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
And so tell us about your background. Tell us about yourself and what you've been through.
Okay. After college, I had a real passion for politics. So I wound up in Washington.
College was where?
College was Wesleyan in Connecticut.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I graduated in 1990, which was the worst recession before the last recession.
Okay.
The job market was tough. I had a passion for politics and really was trying to get a job working on Capitol Hill. I started interning for Congressman Joe Kennedy, who was Bobby Kennedy's son.
All right.
And had trouble, the job market was tough. I didn't find full-time work, but I did wind up meeting my wife, although I didn't know it at the time.
So it was worth it, all right.
Yeah. I wound up working for a city council campaign in Brooklyn, and after that ended, decided to go back to Washington and go to law school at night, and then after I graduated from law school, try Capitol Hill again. So I went back to Washington, and before I could even start law school, I found a job on Capitol Hill, and for the next 5 years, 4 or 5 years, I was working on Capitol Hill full-time and going to law school.
Paul
Kanjorski, who represented Northeast Pennsylvania, up around Wilkes-Barre.
Scranton.
Yep, that part of Pennsylvania.
Where Joe Biden is from.
Yes.
Scranton.
Yep.
Right. So, what was that a joy to work for him?
He was really
a very
dream? Well, you know what? He was actually a really honest, good guy to work for. We had an excellent relationship. He learned to rely on my advice, and I appreciated that.
Were you his chief counsel? Or?
I wasn't his chief counsel. I was in charge of advising him on whatever was being voted on the floor of the House.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're in Washington and there's a vote, literally a bell starts to ring, and you have 15 minutes to go from your office or wherever you are to the floor of the House of Representatives.
And there's a train that takes you.
And there's trains, and depending on where you are physically, it's quicker to walk or, so when the bell would ring, and usually the congressman is in his office. If he was, I'd sit right outside the office. And eventually he would come, very close to the deadline always, and I had about 30 to 70 seconds to explain to him exactly what was being voted on and what I thought he should vote and why. And, according to his politics, not necessarily mine.
So you gave him the elevator pitch.
And it was the ultimate elevator pitch, and I was able to really refine that after doing that for a few years.
And what was his focus? Was his focus on energy? Or?
His focus was really banking. He wound up becoming one of the highest, after I left, highest ranking members of the banking committee. But actually a lot of what I did for him, he was also on the government committee. And I spent much of my time down there as a staffer on the government committee, actually defending Hillary Clinton when there was a scandal called Travelgate. One of the first times that everybody tried to say, Hillary Clinton's a criminal and should be gotten rid of. There was nothing to that, I can assure you, but it was a big scandal back in the early 90s.
So why? And did he leave Congress?
Not voluntarily. That wave of 2010, he was actually in Congress the whole time, from when I left in 1996 to 2010.
And he got defeated?
And he was defeated.
By a Republican in Scranton?
Yes, actually a
That's like
big chunk.
Collar.
Well, things are changing very much in Pennsylvania. If you follow the politics, much of Pennsylvania outside the Philly and Pittsburgh metro areas are turning from Democrat to Republican. And we've been seeing that, saw it with Congressman Kajorski.
So where did you go from after Washington being consul? Sounds like an
So,
interesting job.
It was very interesting. I wound up coming back here where I grew up. I grew up in North Greenbush in Rensselaer County, and got married and dragged my wife to Rensselaer County from Washington. And I said, give this 2 years. If you don't like it after 2 years, we can go anywhere in the country that you want to go. And that was 20 years ago.
All right, so I guess you like the Capital District, that's it.
So you started your own practice, or you were a partner?
Yeah, I'd actually
practice?
started, my father was an attorney, and my passion for politics continued. So one of the reasons I wanted to come back here was actually to run for office myself. You know, you can work for other people for just so long, and you know.
And what did you run for?
Well, I've run for quite a few things.
Yeah.
When I first came back, I ran for town board in Skodak. I'm a Democrat. Skodak's a very heavily Republican town, and I didn't know it at the time, but I was running against Eileen Natoli, who's lovely. Yeah. Her husband Jim was the director of state operations
for Governor Pataki.
So I was this idealistic, you know, just out of law school and coming up from Washington and running for town board in Skodak, you know, this town of 12,000 people.
If you defeated her, you would have been on skyrocketing to the assembly.
Well, in that race, there was polling done.
Yeah.
The state Republican committee had poured about $20,000 into this town council race.
Really? Oh, to keep her there, yeah.
Well, she was running for the first time, actually.
Oh,
so,
okay. I see.
But it was a
a
great introduction into politics.
Well, you were a formidable opponent.
I'm very proud. I did get over 40% of the vote in that election.
Okay, well, that's the key.
Which I was proud of.
If you get over 40%, then people start taking you seriously. Yeah. And that's the benchmark.
And the funny thing and this happens all the time in politics, I had a platform for that race, and I lost. Every single point in my platform was adopted by the town board. So it's an example of how you actually don't necessarily have to win elections, and I think we're seeing it with Bernie Sanders in this election. You don't necessarily have to win to have your ideas become adopted and become part of public discourse.
Aside from the fact that your father probably was a Democrat and his father's, but aside from the fact that it might be, you know, why did you become a Democrat?
My father was Republican.
Okay.
And
go ahead.
So now it's a bigger question why you turned to a Democrat.
Yeah, no. In terms of what was happening in the party politics, I studied politics in school, and the platform aligned with my views.
Go ahead.
Very good. So you lost then, keep on rolling.
So I lost then. There was another time that I ran just because there was no other candidate, but I didn't try. I ran then. I didn't actually try to get elected. I just had, again, town board for Skodak. But as you may imagine, when you start having babies, it becomes a lot more difficult to do things run for office.
For people who don't know, why, if you're in North Greenbush, why would you be running in a town of Skodak?
When I moved to the Capital District, I moved to Skodak. So I lived in Skodak from 1996 to 2003.
Well, why did you, so you became a Democrat because?
Yeah, because out of the major political parties, the Democratic Party best fit with my personal political ideas.
And which was, or is?
I'm very much, if you had to describe my views, I'd call them progressive and libertarian. At the time, particularly in the early 90s, when it came to issues like civil rights, the Democrats were much stronger in terms of making sure that everybody is taken care of. And when I say everybody, my personal philosophy is that in any modern society, you have a duty, governments have a duty to at least try to make sure that children don't go hungry and are cared for. You can blame adults for a lot of problems that they face or that they bring upon themselves. But when it comes to the children who've never done anything wrong, government, communities should be making sure that the children are cared for.
Yeah,
so that's my starting point in terms of politics.
But Republicans are also caring. I mean, who doesn't care about taking care of children? I mean, I always say that it's always the means to the end. That's the difference between Republican and Democrat. That everyone wants a clean environment. Everyone wants good elections. Everyone wants, you know, good proper education. You know, it's all the E's, you know, that you, and you know, it's just how do you get there that separates the Republicans from the Democrats?
Yeah, but especially, you know, again, we were talking about 25 years ago, there were some significant policy differences at the time that
on the federal level, but not on the state or the
correct,
town level.
and the federal level really.
And you weren't running for a federal office, so why did you think that?
Oh no, but that's at that point it becomes more practical when you've been. It's difficult to, maybe less so now, but it used to be very difficult to switch parties. If you had worked on a Democratic campaign and for Democratic members of Congress, you wouldn't switch to become Republican, even if that party really reflected, just in terms of practical, political.
Well, you know, as you might know, I was the executive director of the Albany County Republican Committee, and for 2.5 years, and it was those 2.5 years that I was an enrolled Republican. But the rest of my time, before and after, I've been a blank, not enrolled in any party. You know, and I'm also more libertarian and progressive than I am Democrat or Republican. So, you know, we see alike. I mean, but you could all. I mean, I wouldn't have any trouble saying, "Oh, I could enroll as a Democrat because that's where my future is." You know, if I was going to, you know, in the city of Albany, it's suicide to enroll as a Republican and try to run.
And that's a good example.
Yeah.
I mean, if you try to become elected as either a Republican or a Democrat, and you have a history of being a member of the party on the other side, you're less likely to have the opportunity to get the nomination, to make the run. So you were asking me, like, what thought process, but there really wasn't any.
Okay.
Because of the practical considerations. Once you identify as a Democrat, that's the side you're on.
So you were elected the second time to the town board?
I was not. So I was not elected. I was never elected in Skodak.
Right. And you were smart to get out of town.
And I got out of town, bought the house I grew up in North Greenbush. It's a wonderful old farmhouse at the end of a dead-end street. And I had become active in Rensselaer County politics and stayed active on the county level during that time.
Even though you were a practicing attorney? I mean,
Right.
This was a
so
sideline.
this was a time-consuming hobby of mine, essentially.
So, do you know my friend Brian Zweig?
Very well. Very good friend of mine.
Okay.
Yes.
So he ran for county legislature and
Yes.
won one term.
Yep.
Did you ever, I mean, I know you were town justice in the
Right.
town of North Greenbush, but did you ever think of running for county legislature?
I had. Actually, the race he ran, I was very much involved with that whole campaign platform and the politics that were going on at that time. There was an annexation attempt in part of North Greenbush, which wound up becoming very, very unpopular, and that helped Brian get elected.
Oh, there you go. You had some, you know, now you're rolling on. That was in from 2010 to 2013, you were town justice.
Correct.
Okay.
And in 2013, I had a choice. I could run for re-election, or there was an open seat for surrogate court judge, the judges that handle estates and adoptions. And I had enjoyed being a judge very much, and decided that instead of running for re-election in North Greenbush, I would run for this full-time county-wide seat. Now, in the whole history of Rensselaer County, no Jew has ever been elected to county-wide office. Yes.
Wait a minute. Say this again.
In the history of Rensselaer County, no Jew has ever been elected to county-wide office.
Except now Joel Abelow.
Except now Joel Haviloff. That's right. I should have.
But he's a Republican.
Right. It didn't matter. It didn't.
No,
any because I was only thinking about myself. Up until 2013.
Maybe you discount
no, that was
Republicans altogether.
No, you know what? Once I lost.
Okay.
Yes,
No one can make it.
So Joel is the very first one. So in
Right.
2013, no one had succeeded. And,
But did you get whooped, or did you get
It
over
was-
40%?
no, it was. I got over 40%, but it's a little, especially Rensselaer County politics. It really comes down to how many of the minor party lines you have, and it's almost every single race is the same. And I know with mine, I was on 2, and my Judge Morgan was on 4. And Judge Morgan won. If Judge Morgan was on 2 and I was on 4, I would have won.
I see.
And who is the candidate for judge on the minor party lines has really nothing to do with the merits of you as a potential judge or person. It really doesn't have anything to do with anything that you can control necessarily.
And then after that, you just said, okay, I'll open up my own practice.
And I had been, the North Greenbush Town Justice was part-time, so I always had my practice. But for many years, I was also doing other things. I was town attorney in North Greenbush. I was deputy corporation counsel in Troy. And for the first time after I lost in 2013, I've only had one job, which was my own law practice.
And what law do you specify in?
I specialize in clean energy industries. I do a lot of work with hydro, and I've been involved in a biodiesel company that in 2005, when I started working with them, was just an idea that you could take used cooking oil.
Right now, we're on the cutting edge, because now it's really blossomed into a really big industry with solar and hydro.
Yes.
I mean, people are all looking for alternative energies now. It's a big thing.
Which is a great thing. I mean, with the biodiesel, every gallon of biodiesel, there's 90% less pollutants released in the atmosphere than
How do you
that
make
gallon of
biodiesel? Through that corn again?
It could be any kind of what the company that I'm involved with really specializes in used cooking oil. So that Chinese restaurant, when they're done frying everything, you can't pour it down the sewer. You have to store it and dispose of it properly. And we've been collecting that eventually to the tune of 2 million gallons a year of used cooking oil from
Just
Washington. Well, from Washington to Boston, actually.
That's a lot.
And making sure that was being produced into biodiesel.
Where do you store it?
We have a facility in the Bronx where we clean it up, most of what we collect, and then sell it. So there's large tanks.
Vats like you have for wineries,
even bigger. No, it's more like it's actually usually not quite as big, but if you've seen the petroleum tanks, those tend to be bigger than ones. So you think of the huge ones, but there are a lot of smaller petroleum tanks with like smaller distributors.
In the port along
not as
Route
big
144,
as. If you ever see a smaller tank next to one of those really big round tanks, those are the types of tanks that we use.
And then what do you do with the biodiesel?
So,
anybody could, the diesel like a truck?
Yeah, now the engines for the most part are warranted to run on 20% biodiesel. So if you have 20% biodiesel or less, there's no chance that you won't have a problem with your warranty. So typically the biodiesel is blended with petrodiesel in either 5% or 20%, and then sold on the market.
So it's not ethanol. It's not.
No, it's not ethanol. But we also have pioneered in New York City, literally replacing number 2 heating oil with biodiesel, which has worked fantastically. It's one of those things that people said, you can't do it. The boilers will break. And we've had a tremendous success.
How does it work? I mean, a little bit. Cooking oil is good to burn.
Well, it's not cooking oil, but the cooking oil is refined into a diesel fuel. But the diesel will run in the boilers just as well, better than.
And it costs less.
And if it costs less, they'll use this. And these building owners, trust me, if it won't cost less, they won't use it. But we're able often to come in a little bit cheaper. There's a tax credit that the owner is able to get. That's what brings our price down below what they would spend for petrodiesel or petrol oil for the boilers, and are able to take some of that heating. That heating oil really is a tremendous pollutant, but we've been able to replace that with clean burning biodiesel.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's great. And
So that's been a lot of fun, as you can tell. I've been excited about it, getting this company from an idea.
You're quelling. Yes, I know. But what about the hydro part? I mean, I didn't know we would. I know Green Island has a hydroelectric plant,
and that's where I got my start. Actually, was with Green Island. There was back around the turn of the century, the late '90s. There was a whole series of assessment fights. It was easy for these small towns to have very high assessments on the hydro plants because those taxes were built right into the rates. Nobody really minded. It was all part of the public good. But with deregulation, all of a sudden that became a real cost. So there was a series of litigation around the state on the assessments of these hydro plants. And one of the strategies, and the strategy that Green Island was able to use successfully, was the response to the assessment argument was, okay, if you believe that the plant should be assessed at X million dollars, then we will use the power of eminent domain to take this public good at that cost. And that was some very interesting litigation. That's how Green Island wound up with the hydro plant.
Because they're the only other one besides Niagara Falls that has a hydro plant in the state, I believe. Sean Ward was on the program, and he was telling us about this. So.
So you're the attorney for just to...
I used to be at the time, so I worked with Sean and the folks at Green Island. I was a litigation counsel and was settled the case and enacted the transfer of that plant to the Green Island Power Authority. So based on that experience, that made me a hydro guy.
Expert,
and I've been involved in different transactions of different plants, typically in New York State.
So is it growing? I mean, what's the bigger picture
No,
now?
it actually isn't. One of the things with energy costs the way they are today.
You mean low gas prices?
Yeah, and electricity. It's just not economical to build a new hydro facility, almost always. So really the whole industry that I'm involved is taking existing plants and they're being relicensed, bought and sold.
So let me ask you about, as the nuclear power plants, as we see Fitzpatrick and 9 Mile up in Syracuse area, Oswego, and we see Indian Point, kind of running on their last legs. I mean, they're up 25, 30 years. Shouldn't we be looking for some replacement? Because especially Indian Point, they supply lower New York State with, I think, 80% or something of their energy. So shouldn't we be looking at hydro and other
Absolutely.
places?
We should be trying to ensure that existing hydro facilities, and there's a lot of controversy about when you build a new dam, about the environmental impact of that and what happens with fish population, but with existing hydro facilities to try to make sure that each of them are sized to make the most electricity you can at each site.
Well, there's nothing downstate in hydro.
And there's nothing downstate in hydro. I don't think that's going to change.
Oh.
It's really a question of getting the electricity in the grid to downstate.
Did you ever want to get involved with the Public Service Commission and do, maybe be a commissioner or be, involved on staff there? I mean, you seem that this is all that they deal with. I mean, a lot of what they deal with.
It's very interesting work. It's very interesting work.
But would it be too confining and too constraining to be part of a governmental entity at this point in your life, as opposed to
It depends.
being out on your own, have the freedom?
Being self-employed has a lot of benefits.
It
I
does.
enjoy having my my own practice.
And your own time, as you said, you know,
And
the time
I do.
is your own.
And,
you know?
and a lot of times I revolve it around the kids. So
Right.
even when I'm really busy, most of the time, you know, I'm leaving at 5 o'clock, picking kids up, dropping them off, and then I'll just go back to the office at 7:30, 8 o'clock, you know, and that works for me. Nobody's looking over my shoulder saying, why is he leaving at 4:30 every day?
Yeah, yeah. So, as Rabbi Simon would say, this is a Jewish view, so we should ask you more of what your background is, Jewish background.
Yeah, so I grew up in Birth Shalom in Troy, which I'm going to plug. It's our sesquicentennial
That's right.
year this year. And so that's my foundation.
I taught Hebrew school there once.
That's right, we
Sunday
had that
school.
conversation.
That's right. Sunday school one year. Yes, so.
Mark meant to be a rabbi. Maybe I should be a little reporter also. That's why I'm on the Jewish View. All right.
Go ahead.
And
try.
so after moving back to the area, rejoined right away as an adult. Been on the board for a couple of terms, but lately I've really refocused my Jewish activity towards Federation. So now I'm very active in Federation.
And what do you do for the Jewish Federation of Northeastern New York?
Yep. Right now I'm the treasurer. I'm on the board of Governors, the Human Resources Committee, the Brandeis Baruch Committee.
So you're not the paid treasurer, you're the lay treasurer.
I am the board treasurer, so
You're
I'm
the
the
board
unpaid.
treasurer. Right.
I'm the one who signs. I'm signing it. I'm not doing the work,
Oh, because
but I make sure I understand what all the
yeah,
numbers
because
are.
Rob Kovacs used to be the treasurer,
Yes.
and he's got a CPA
Now-
before he was CEO.
Right. Correct.
So that was on the paid side, and then they have a duplicate set of lay people to checks and balances.
Well, right.
make
For any
sure that-
nonprofit, it's like a shul where you have your bookkeeper, but then you have your treasurer making sure that the books are being done correctly.
I
The
see.
numbers are what they
So
should.
how are things going there with the books at the Federation?
They're going well.
Okay.
They're going well.
No irregularities, everything's good?
No, everything's good.
I thought we'd have some news
Yep.
here. You can't blame me for trying.
Nope, that was a great question. I have nothing interesting to say in response, so.
So where do you see the Federation going in terms of their outreach to the community and their focus, being that you're such a macha on the board now?
Yeah, well, that's been part of the appeal. There's been a change of focus in our Federation to really try to make sure that programs for the Jewish community exist.
Yeah.
So to the point where if we've identified a need for the Jewish community, and there aren't existing service providers aren't delivering that need, Federation has started to do it ourselves, and I've been pleased with that direction. Some of the things that we've really been pushing, the PJ library, to have the Jewish books for small children, making sure that
That's a foundation that's out of Massachusetts.
Yep.
And they do wonderful work, and I'm glad to see Federation collaborating with them, because they've been around a long time before Federation got involved.
But without Federation, it wasn't taking off here in the Capital District, and now it really is.
There were a couple of synagogues, I think, that had some tentacles, and they were trying it. Yeah, I think that's how they got to know.
Well, the Lubavitch Rebbe always felt that the Federation, and religion aside, and there's different religion, but Federation is an umbrella group. And maybe, like you say, you can shift a little priorities here and there. Obviously, money goes to this thing or the other thing. But he always said, even there's checks that the Rebbe gave to the Federation in New York City because he felt that they are doing good work. So, like anybody, like any Jewish person, felt that he felt that this should be shifted more to Jewish education. But still, they were doing a good thing, and just joining all Jews together on being on one page, that itself is big news.
I always say that Federation is the Jewish United Way.
Yes.
For the non-Jews who can relate to it, it's an all-encompassing umbrella of a Jewish United Way.
So the programmatic change I'm talking about is making it a little less United Way, which typically is just passing the money through.
Right. And you're saying that you start, when you see a need, Federation themselves start the program.
Well, we'll look to the community first.
Uh-huh.
But if nobody is able or willing in the community
Yeah.
to have a program that we think the
Well, you see-
community needs, then we'll do it.
And that's what I did with my jbiztechvalley.com website, not to give it a shameless plug,
But you did.
But I saw that there was a need to put the entire, aside from the counties at the Federation, but the greater capital district under one virtual umbrella, so people know how diverse we are in this area. I felt Federation wasn't doing that as well as any other group, and this is something that I needed to do. So I went ahead and did it. I didn't ask Federation's permission, which ticked them off, I guess. But, I just went ahead and created this. And, it was to everyone's surprise, but it's been a very informative directory, and people have liked it. And, everyone who says that they're Jewish gets in my directory. I don't go checking anything, that's just the way it is. And anyway, so I think you're in my directory. If you're not, I'll definitely check. And
I just responded to LinkedIn today, so I don't know if that, I don't know if that gets me in.
I'll connect you up.
No, it's not with LinkedIn. It's my
Okay.
own website that I actually went and I put people's names in on
I'll
my
have to
own.
check.
So I'll have to
All
check
right,
it.
listen, we're out of time,
Okay.
Josh. You're doing great work both with your job, because you're making the environment is a Jewish idea, making it better for everybody. Everybody has to drink the water and breathe the air. Also, your work with Jewish Federation. So keep on doing with a lot of success and with good health.
Yes,
Thank you, Rabbi.
Continued success.
Thank you, Mark.